Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters, and welcome to this week's live chat. Right before I went live, I just kind of joked, I hope I can remember how to do this. It's been 3 weeks. But if you're joining me live, thank you so much for coming. I love hanging out on Thursdays at 3 p.m. Central, talking about one of my favorite things, machine quilting. In today's live chat, I'm going to be sharing some tips for using cutout rulers, and I'll be answering your questions live, and I have a giveaway. So we got some new Quilting is My Therapy lanyards, a beautiful purplish blue with some swirls on it, and so one lucky viewer watching live will win this. So all you have to do is type in a comment wishing Jessica happy birthday. That's right, you know, the illustrious Jessica, always behind the camera. She's the one that monitors the chats, writes down the questions, kicks out the spammers, and excited to have her birthday tomorrow. So wish her happy birthday, and she'll pick a lucky winner at the very end. And then I also have a special promo for live chatters as well. Like I said, I normally do this every week, but I was out of town 2 weeks ago. I went to Alaska for spring break. It was beautiful and fun. And then last week, we did kind of a different type of live where you kind of poked in on my class. I happened to schedule a long arm class on that Thursday, so I couldn't do the typical live chat, but I'm so excited you're here right now. If you are, be sure to leave your questions, so I'll answer those at the end. And if you're not watching it live, no worries. You can always leave your questions in the comment section. I get on there from time to time and answer them. Now, when I have been doing the live chat, we've been kind of working through a series talking about tips on using rulers for machine quilting. And just to kind of recap what we've already talked about, I've done a whole video series about it where I show you how to use different types of rulers on a sewing machine and a long arm. And I will say that rulers are the one skill that will really grow with you no matter where you are on your free motion journey. Brand new quilters can use rulers, experienced quilters can use rulers. It really is a good thing to learn. But it can be kind of hard to know what to do. Like, I've been there, right? You go to the quilt show, somebody's demoing a ruler, you're like, oh, that's super cool, and you buy it and you get it home and you're like, I don't know how to use this. So when I'm talking through the types of rulers, we're not talking about specific rulers, but just a general category, and that way you can use the ones that you know and love. So if you're interested in learning how to do that, definitely check out the video series. It's on my YouTube channel. It's called The Machine Quilting with Rulers Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along. And then that's been, I don't know, a couple years ago that I did that series, and we're just kind of, you know, doing a flashback, recapping a little bit, just things, new rulers come out or things change, and just kind of recapping it a bit. I will say, coming up, probably the next month, we'll be announcing the next Free Motion Challenge Quilting Along video series, and I can tell you it's going to be negative spaces, so we'll be talking about designs for those big background areas. So I'm super excited. That's been kind of keeping us all busy over the last couple weeks, but I cannot wait to tell you about it. But not today. Today we're going to talk about cutout rulers. And so when we're talking about cutout rulers, they're just really fun to quilt with. Now, like I said, I had that whole video series where we talk about it, and this was, I think, week 4 or 5, or video 4 or 5 of it. And in the video series, I'm quilting through this panel. We still have some of those panels available, so if you want to quilt along with me on it, you can. But one of the weeks we talked about cutout rulers, and I have a promo code, and normally I say this for the end, but I thought, oh, well, I'll put it at the beginning too. So I'm going to be talking about Dot and Petunia and Taj, and if you want to get your hands on any of those rulers, you can get 25% off just for this week. So you can click the link in the description box below and use the promo code cutout when checking out. But be sure to stick around to the end, because I'm going to tell you how you can get some free quilting diagrams as well. So when we talk about cutout rulers, I'm just talking about a ruler where we're quilting along the inside of it as opposed to the outside. Now, it might seem like the same deal, but I find that cutout rulers tend to be a little bit easier to quilt with for newer quilters. That's because as we quilt, sometimes that centrifugal force will make us quilt off the outside, whereas here, we're kind of in a defined area. Now, of course, every quilter is different, and there might be some of you out there like, no, I don't do great with it. But they come in so many different shapes, and you can do a lot of different things with them. Whether it's a leaf, a heart, a triangle, I will say they tend to be smaller. So that also makes them a little appealing to newer quilters. Now, if you're thinking like, ooh, which one should I get? You really have to ask yourself, what is it you want to learn? When I talk about quilting with rulers, I always tell quilters the first ruler you should get is a straight edge ruler, because you'll use it a lot. The point of contact is always the same on the ruler. But beyond that, it just depends, what do you want to quilt and what do you struggle with? So like I said, not every ruler is for every quilter, but cutout rulers are definitely a lot of fun. Here you can kind of see the Taj ruler in action. What I love about cutout rulers is you have a little bit of a handle to hold onto as you kind of grip the outside. And so for some quilters, like I said, it's a little bit easier. Now on a long arm, it's not any more difficult. It's about the same, but you do have to get comfortable using that ruler in all different directions. And so there definitely is some weird hand positions as you're working your way around them. But there's so much that you can do with these rulers. I know in previous live chats, I always say this, but if you have some rulers laying around and you want to come up with some designs, get a piece of fabric, a yard, load it on your long arm or make a quilt sandwich and try a bunch of different designs. That's where you're going to kind of get comfortable moving it around. And then when you're done, you cut out the pieces that you like, use that as your quilting inspiration, and the rest can just go away. So it's really the practicing and using it in all different ways that are going to help you out. Now, some cutouts are kind of enclosed like that Taj was, and some of them are open like Petunia here. Really, it doesn't matter the shape or what it looks like. We're talking about quilting along the inside, not the outside. So when it comes to using those cutout rulers, the thing to remember is direction. Direction is what's going to create different ones, whether you rotate around a point for a motif, whether you go in a line for a border, or you go in all different directions for a filler. So really, we're just taking that shape and repositioning it in a certain direction to create different effects. So, I mean, I could sum up the whole chat right there and just end right now and we'd be good, but I'm not going to do that because I like to talk and I got pictures for you. So the first thing is meandering. You can do this with any shape. Meandering is just taking one shape and going in all different directions to create a beautiful texture. Now, if you think about free motion quilting without rulers, we do that with leaves and swirls. Here, we're just doing it with a ruler. Now, I will pause and say, I have said this previously, quilting with a ruler is still free motion quilting. Anytime you're moving that fabric or moving the machine, it's free motion. It's just giving you a little bit of a template, a little bit of a guide to help you out. Now, I think rulers are awesome tools, but they're not crutches. So don't feel like you always have to use a ruler to do a design, but if you need to, go for it. And here we're using the Taj to create that meandering kind of shape. Now, the trick to meandering is I need to quilt my shape and then travel to reposition. If I just quilt around the shape and then reposition the ruler, I'm going to end up kind of spinning around a certain point, which would give us a motif. But in this example, we want to go in a lot of different directions, and we're going to use traveling to do that. Now, traveling is quilting along that previously quilted line, which usually is kind of like a bad word when we're doing other free motion designs. But the great thing about the cutout is you go around the ruler, keep the ruler in place, and you just back up or go along the other side to get to where you need to go. So first, you're going to position that ruler where you want to quilt the design. What's also really nice about a cutout is if you look at that cutout shape, your quilted design is always going to be smaller than that. So you have the ability to reposition and audition where you want that shape to go before you quilt it. So a lot of my time quilting, that's kind of figuring out where do I want this next leaf. I'm going to position it there and I'm going to quilt around so you can kind of see in that little illustration. But before I reposition the ruler or before I move to go to a different spot, I'm going to backtrack along that quilting so I can just get out of that point where I started. Now, the distance that you backtrack is up to you. It just depends on the effect you're going for. Mostly we just need to get out of that starting point so we can reposition in a different kind of direction. Now, Taj has some reference marks around that cutout, but if you wanted to keep it very specific, like you were doing them in a row or you want to make sure you reposition the same time all the time, if your ruler doesn't have those reference marks, you can use glow line tape or even washi tape to kind of put that temporary marking on there for you. Those reference marks on the rulers are really what make them so fun to use and help you create the designs without a lot of marking. Once I backtracked, then I'm going to reposition the ruler and then repeat. So you can kind of see here I'm repositioning it to go to the right. Anytime I'm quilting a meandering design or something that goes all over, I want it to go in all different directions. I don't necessarily want to see a pattern. I think that our brains are attracted to that pattern or that repetition. It kind of draws our attention. And in a meandering case, we just want them all to kind of blend in with each other. Now, I don't think you have to overthink that. Sometimes I say words out loud and I realize that I'm pretty, hardcore about some of my quilting preferences. But the good thing is you can do whatever you like. Anyway, so once I reposition it, then I can quilt it, backtrack or quilt along that edge a little bit, and then continue repositioning, going in all different directions. Now, we saw that example with the Taj ruler, but here we can see I've done the same with a cutout ruler that had circles in it. The difference here is I intentionally overlapped the circles a bit to give it a more kind of chaotic look. Now, this is actually a really cool technique because it looks intentional, right? You can say you love the juxtaposition of the overlap or whatever you want to say, but it kind of helps hide the individual shapes. So if you're struggling a little bit with rotating or quilting along that ruler, sometimes overlapping them gives you that cool kind of chaotic effect. I will say though, if you're going to overlap them, do it enough that it looks intentional. So I don't want to overlap it just a little bit because that might just look like I was trying not to do it and I did. So the moral of this story is if you make a mistake, just make it all the way. Make it really good so that it looks like, you meant to do it. Now in this example, I'm kind of meandering, but I'm going in a particular direction. So as a way to draw the eye around the quilt, as a way to, show off your new ruler ninja skills, and then you can fill in around it with a different filler design. Now, I actually did this on a quilt for Tula Pink, and I could not find a picture, and I know I have it somewhere, so you're just going to have to trust me. It looked really cool. Where I did some Taj, and I did pebbles in between it to look kind of like clams on her anchor quilt. So anyway, you can combine that with some free motion filler to really make them pop. And here I did that. I just quilted them kind of in a row. I could have quilted that so it wrapped around a block or maybe followed a border. And then I also could have picked maybe a filler that wasn't so dense, but I do like quilting things to death, so there is that. Now talking about going in a direction, we're going to see some border designs here in a second, but you can take these designs any way you want to go. And here you can kind of see working Taj around a corner. Just like I said, you're always going to be able to audition where that design is going to go. And so you can kind of get a hint of how it's going to look before you start. Now you can do the same along the outside of your rulers, but the thing to remember is the quilting is always going to be bigger on the outside, so you have to remember that. But here, just for a thinner border, a really fun way to quilt that shape within a defined space. And I really feel like some quilters will find this easier. I'm kind of the type of quilter where it's like, just go wherever you want to go, fill it in, it's going to be fine. But other quilters might like to have a set number of steps in a defined area. So if you've tried quilting with a ruler and you're struggling on that all over, try quilting it in a border or in a line. You might just find it a little bit easier. So here you can kind of see some different applications of that Taj. Another great thing to use it for is a motif. So that's that same Taj shape. Of course, you can do it with any shape though, and it's just rotated around that center point. I'm quilting it, around the ruler, come back to my starting point, and then rotating to create that cute little motif. Now, I will say that cutouts tend to be smaller, and so your motifs will be a little smaller as well, which is great. Probably not going to be used for bigger blocks. If I want a nice bigger motif, I might use an arc ruler like we saw in the previous live chat that's been 3 weeks ago, but cute little motif rotating around that center. Now there is some workarounds. If you have that bigger block and your motif isn't quite filling it, you can use some echoing like I've done here, or even do partial motifs in the corner. Really kind of play around with it. I know sometimes we kind of get designs in our head and we kind of get, stuck in not stuck, but in a groove. But think about how you can break up these shapes in different ways, like quilting the quarter motif or, echoing around it. I feel like a lot of my quilting experience came from quilting a lot of different quilts in different situations, and I got to kind of get comfortable adapting these rulers for those things. So you can definitely use them for different types. And here's just an example of another shape. So this is the dot ruler. I call it the dot to dot ruler because it has the angles on it, and I really like how it looks. But you can see that cutout is kind of different. It's like an elongated, kind of pointed kite arrow kind of shape. And here I've just taken that middle cutout and rotated it around a point. Dot is a little bit bigger. So if you're newer to rulers, you may be starting on the smaller ones, but once you get comfortable with them, you can definitely work with the bigger ones like dot. And then here's just a different shape, just a cross motif. You don't even have to do all of the different ones. When I do teach quilting motifs, especially with rulers, I kind of talk about the cross and the diagonals. You can leave out some of those. You don't have to make them as over the top as I do. I think that's the thing to definitely remember. Sometimes we have quilts that we just need to finish, or maybe we don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I like to joke, those are for the people that aren't quilt worthy, but we've gotten guilted into making them a quilt anyway. But I digress. You don't have to make it as complicated as I make it. Probably one of the most common ways to use cutouts though are in borders or sashings, just because we have that kind of defined area and you can do a lot of fun stuff with it. And so here's just some different examples. When you're looking at your rulers that you have laying around, or if you purchase any of these, you don't have to use the whole ruler. That's kind of a joke I like to make in my class. You paid for the whole thing. You just don't have to use it. So as you're looking at your cutouts, think about the shapes. If I just use this shape, what can I get? So here we have Dot just making a chevron, just a nice little chevron border design. Sure, you could use your straight edge ruler for that, but maybe you don't want to have to reposition it. Maybe you already have your Dot ruler out and you're comfortable with it, but you can imagine just easily repeating that shape across the border. Another reason that quilting in borders can be a little bit easier is we have that guideline with the seam, that kind of boundary that we can align up the reference points on our ruler. If you are trying to quilt something out in bigger areas, sometimes marking that reference line will really help give you something to align that ruler up to. But anyway, like I said, you can use the different parts of your ruler. So here would be an example of using the whole dot shape and repeating it. So repeating it along a border, try spacing them out. Try overlapping them a bit. See what kind of design you can come up with. Try flipping them around. Just really quilting them in all different directions and all different orientations. Because I think you'll be surprised. You'll probably come up with your own design variations as well. So it's kind of fun to do that. Now here we can see just using one part, not the point, but the curve. So when I designed Dot, I wanted to have a little bit of that curve so you could do some of those kind of arcs, those arc shapes. And so here you can see I'm quilting along one side, shifting the ruler over, and then quilting back down. Now, the reason Dot makes that kind of shape is I have the needle stops kind of built into the design, so it's real easy to reposition. But regardless of what ruler you're using, I could just mark a reference line on my ruler, just know that I'm always going to reposition when I get to that point and create the shape. So here, again, just kind of creating that arced kind of shape along an area. So quilting along the ruler, shifting it over, repositioning, and continuing on. And so here you can see what that looks like, even with some overlaps. Now, every quilter is different, and especially when you're starting out, especially when you're starting out the new ruler, it's going to take a little bit to get comfortable with how the design goes. Don't feel like you have to sit down at your quilt, get your ruler, and just quilt without stopping. Now, you'll probably get to that point eventually, but in the beginning, take your time, think through the next couple steps. What's going to happen if I continue along here? Where do I need to go, and how can I get there? Instead of being frustrated by how long it takes, just think of it as, a new skill, a new learning lesson. You're just taking your time to learn it. I know it can be frustrating, but I promise it doesn't take as long as you might think. And you can work along one side of the ruler as opposed to the whole thing. So in this example, I'm just quilting along half of that dot shape and repositioning it. Now, I don't want to make things too confusing because I definitely have the ability to do that. But if I wanted to quilt a shape like Dot, but I didn't want to end where I started, I could quilt the tops of several and then quilt the bottoms returning where I was at. So as you're working your way through an area, you can change up how you approach it as well. So instead of quilting each one individually, I just did the tops and then repositioned to do the bottoms. Does it change anything? No, it just makes it a little bit more efficient for me. But just know that as you're looking at the designs, ask yourself, how can I go about this differently? Could I, quilt part of it and come back and do the rest? Now, the more you practice, I promise the easier it will get. I know it's easy for me to say because I'm on the other side of that learning curve, but I promise you might be surprised. The rulers that you have, you start looking at them, you can use them in a lot of different ways. And so here you can see some of those examples. This is just a perfect example of me loading a piece of fabric and quilting a bunch of different things, and then taking pictures of the good ones so I can show you. Trust me, there were some designs that didn't look so good. I just don't show you those designs. But it's just part of learning the different designs and kind of getting comfortable with your rulers. And sometimes you might see a ruler that doesn't look like it's for a border, but you can use it in a border because you can kind of turn the corner. And here we just kind of see the SID ruler, the cutout center, it looks like a T. That's how I made those starbursts there. So again, just repositioning, overlapping, changing direction. Sure, you'll probably make some stuff that looks a little silly. We won't talk about those, but I bet you'll come up with some really fun design ideas. And the last one, just echoes, using that shape and then echoing around it. Like I said, cutout rulers tend to be on the smaller side, so echoing will just help you fill in some bigger areas. And you're just going to do that by kind of shifting the ruler where you want it to go. Now this is Petunia, who does a lot of cool things, but that cutout is like a clamshell. But like I said, instead of working your way around the outside, you're working your way around the inside. And then here we can see quilting that clamshell and then flipping it around will give me kind of like an oval shape as well. So just having fun with those cutouts and seeing what you can come up with. Like I said, they're a lot of fun. Now, if you don't have any cutout rulers and you're like, I think I want to try this, don't forget you can get those at a discount, 25% off. The link is in the description box below. You can check that out. And it also has a link to the video series for the machine quilting with rulers, so you can really see that kind of like in more detail than just me glossing over 5 weeks of video in a 20-minute live chat. Now for some of the rulers, I have put together free quilting diagrams that show you how to use them. So you can click the link in the description box for those as well. So if you already have Dot, you already have Taj, and you're like, oh, how did she do those amazing things? I mean, that's what I'm imagining that you're thinking. You can check out those free quilting diagrams as well. Or even if you don't have those rulers, it'll show you kind of how I'm using that ruler to create those shapes, and you can try them with the rulers that you already have, and you'll come up with your own variations, and they'll look stunning and so beautiful. And then you'll email me and tell me how right I was, and then I print those emails off and I put them in my children's bathroom so they can see that I'm right. No, I'm just kidding. I like to joke. I was joking on the type chat before we started. My kids don't like to listen to me, but at least somebody does, you know. So I hope that was helpful. There was one question in the type chat that came up. It was more like a comment, and it was Lisa, and she was like, the speed versus control with the ruler, will it get easier with practice? And if you think about quilting with rulers, we're working around a template, we're kind of learning how to drive. It will get easier with practice, I promise. Especially the first couple times as you go around a ruler and kind of veer off. You're like, oh man, what was I doing? But it does get easier. I will say though, in general, quilting with rulers is slower than just regular free motion because we're kind of working around that template. So it's going to be a slower kind of skill, but for those areas that you want that precise look and you want to be able to repeat it, it's going to be the perfect way to do that. So let's see, do we have any questions coming up? Next week, we're going to be talking about pointy rulers. So we're kind of summing up this last little video series or little live chat series. We'll talk about how do you get those points when you go around the outside and what can you do with the pointy rulers. So let's see, I have a hard time using rulers on my home sewing machine. Any suggestions? Oh, it can be a struggle for sure because you feel like you're pushing on something and it's not really connecting to the quilt. The best thing I could say is work in little increments. Don't feel like you have to work really far. Reposition the quilt often, and I promise it gets easier. Another thing that can help, and this is a little vague, but make sure you're sitting up tall enough that you can push down on the ruler and the quilt and move along it. Sometimes if the quilt is too high, we're kind of like T-Rexing it, is what I like to call it. We're going to use gravity on our side. Now, of course, I don't want to sit up so tall that I can't see the quilting, so you have to kind of play with that. And I would say in the beginning on home sewing machines, if you're newer to rulers, the smaller rulers will be a little bit easier. The bigger rulers are great because they show you where you're heading, they let you create these bigger designs, but you're really going to have to work within a defined area, so you might find that easier as well. I promise though, it gets easier. And anybody that's watching can comment on there and say, hey, yeah, I've been there before. It just takes a little bit of practice. I promise though, after a little practice, you'll be whipping that thing around like a ninja star. So keep at it. What is the best straight ruler for a total newbie? Now, I'm going to say slim because I designed slim. It's a straight edge ruler with a little curve at the end. I think I might have one. I always look in my drawer. I never have it. I do have a Taj, but I don't have a slim ruler. I like slim because he's hand-sized. The trick about quilting with rulers is you have to reposition your hand or reposition the ruler as the needle passes your fingertips. That's where you have control. So even though I quilt on a long arm, I use slim 100% of the time. Now, if you quilt a lot of bigger blocks or you quilt a lot on your long arm and you're like, I want a longer ruler so I can see where I'm heading, then you might prefer a straight or a bigger one. But slim is kind of like my ride or die. I like him, but that's just me. All right, how do I learn control of the long arm? I wobble and swing wide. Yeah, it's tricky because on a long arm you have such freedom of movement, right? Just it glides. On a sewing machine, it's not like the quilt ever just like glides away from you and you're like, oh, get back over here, you silly quilt. So that will also come with practice. But I will say, as you're quilting on the long arm specifically, think about where the point of contact needs to be on that ruler. And imagine the machine kind of nudging into it. So if I look at Taj, if this is my foot of my machine, as I come along, I'm touching this side of my foot, but as I come up and around, that point of contact is changing. So I just need to be aware of that, like, okay, I'm going to now be moving along this side. Another thing that can struggle with on long arms is sometimes we think if we push the ruler, more securely or harder, if we quilt, like really close and stop breathing, it'll be better. But we don't want to push too hard on that ruler because that's going to keep the machine from moving smoothly. So just think about that point of contact, practice a little bit, and I promise it'll get easier. I will say another thing about quilting on a long arm is you're engaging both sets of wheels. So you're kind of having to move through that design with confidence to get that momentum, but I promise it gets easier. And I'm sorry, I feel like in my classes and my videos, I'm always like, it takes practice. In my classes, I always feel bad. I'm like, you paid money to take this, and I'm telling you to practice. But really, it does. It does help, and it doesn't take as long as you might think. I have a one block wonder, and I'm wondering how to quilt all the hexagons. Well, it depends. How big are the hexagons? How busy is the fabric? Is it a floral fabric? Hexagons are great because you already have that block that you can use as kind of markings. So I probably wouldn't quilt motifs in each one because that would take forever. I might do an all over design over most of it, but highlight some of my favorite blocks or favorite configurations and do something different in there. So for instance, if I wanted to show off these particular blocks, I do swirls everywhere else, and then in those hexagons, maybe just echo the inside. That contrast will help it pop out. Another thing you can do is some continuous curve. That's usually my go-to because you can do it nice and quickly. So that's where you kind of go from point to point doing a curve. If they're smaller hexagons, I might just do a swirl that kind of centers in each one. But like I said, it just depends on a lot of different stuff. But one block wonder quilts are so cool. When quilting a Tula quilt, which is your most common ruler? It's slim. It's slim because, you know, especially with her quilts, I'm doing a lot of stitching in the ditch, a lot of tying off. So I love to use slim for that. Although I have used Taj on several of her quilts as well. For the most part, I do use rulers, but not as much as I did when I started. Mostly because I get more comfortable with just freehanding it. So for instance, wavy rulers, I'm comfortable just quilting a wavy line. So that kind of goes with that whole idea, you know, don't use it like a crutch, but that's the answer to that one. Hopefully that helped. I don't know, I feel sometimes like, I think like, oh, that is kind of weird. All right, I hope you've enjoyed it. Again, if you have any questions about quilting with the cutout rulers, leave them in the comments. I get on there from time to time. And I also know that other quilters are really great to chime in and help out. And if you like any of the free stuff I put out, any of the live chats, any of the free quilting diagrams or video series, I hope you'll subscribe or give the video a thumbs up. That just lets YouTube know that you like it and that other quilters might like it as well. And I'd appreciate it too. All right, and how about the winner of the lanyard? This person will be super excited to promote my brand around their neck. But the winner is Sherry Carter. So Sherry, if you want to leave a comment or email us, if you want to email us at customerservice@quiltingismytherapy, we'll get that to you. Now, I'll be back again next week with the Pointy Rulers live chat. Until then, everybody, stay safe and happy